Join me today for a D&D themed episode of Spinning My Wheels. Welcome back to those of you who've been here before, and welcome to those of you who are new to the channel. This is a segment that we have decided to dub Spinning My Wheels. It's where I talk about stuff while I drive around. I guess as a point of clarity, I don't hop in the car to talk about stuff. I have to drive around for other reasons. Just in case any of you were wondering about that. So, today we're going to be talking about a D&D related topic. I guess this probably fits under our DM tips segment, because we're going to be talking about the nature of undead creatures. A few specific types, but also some just general stuff about them. And this primarily falls under DM tips because the undead are almost always villains. So the DM will be the one running them. So, this is going to focus primarily on a few types of intelligent undead, because the unintelligent undead are a lot more straightforward. The unintelligent undead typically just go on autopilot. Now they can be commanded by like a necromancer or summoner or whoever brought them into existence, or someone that has the power or force of will to do so, at which point they're under their command and they follow their orders so long as they're under their command. Presumably very simple orders like guard this door, kill anyone that comes in the room, etc. You're not going to be telling them how to solve the Fermi paradox or anything. Or at least I wouldn't believe you could. I mean, that's the impression I'm under anyway. So, if they're not under the command of someone else, though, unintelligent undead just go on, and I don't want to call it instinct, but I guess it's like a base motivation that they have, which is to attack the living. They can roam, they can stay in one place, but either way, living creature comes by, they will attack. And I believe this is tied into the fact that all or almost all of the undead are powered by negative energy. Now, in D&D terms, because I don't think this is covered as much in 5th edition, the two of the other planes of existence are the positive energy plane and the negative energy plane. All cleric healing spells infuse positive energy into people, which is how they heal. It's life force. Okay, negative energy is like death force. So I'd have to check, but I don't think this carried over to 5th, but I could be wrong. In previous editions, if you used a healing spell against an undead creature, it caused them harm because they're powered by negative energy instead of positive energy like a living creature. So positive energy hurts them, whereas most creatures, negative energy hurts them. So the reverse is also true of negative energy heals undead creatures. And positive and negative energy, like I said, come from the positive and negative energy planes. So you've got that, which is why in other editions, evil clerics, the fact they can choose harming spells and not just healing spells wasn't just to hurt other characters, it was also to heal undead minions that they had, if they so chose. So, negative energy being, negative and anti-life, I believe is what drives your unintelligent undead to attack the living. Because they are, like, at an essential level, they are enemies now. Because that's kind of a big thing we're going to talk about here, is becoming an undead creature fundamentally alters your state of being. And that seems to be a hard concept for some people to grasp, just from what I've seen looking around. And that's the kind of thing we're going to go into here. So, this fundamental change is physical as well as mental, and there are aspects of it that don't that even the undead, I think, don't totally appreciate what has completely happened to them. If you want to kind of see examples of this, I believe in some of the Anne Rice vampire books. It's been a while since I read the few that I read. And I believe also in, like, Buffy the Vampire Slayer. And again, I could have the examples wrong here as far as where they came from. But I know there is fiction where some of the vampires talk about the fact that they still breathe. Like, their lungs and everything still go through the motions, even though they don't need to breathe. They're dead. They don't need oxygen. And so that's why some of them kind of freak out and think that they're drowning whenever they go underwater. And it takes a minute to adjust to remember, oh, right, it's because they spent their entire life doing that, and their brain still works, their muscles all still work, so it still keeps doing its thing because it's not shut off. So that aspect of mortal life is still with them, even though they don't need it. Okay? That's in some other series. I don't know if that applies to D&D vampires. That's up to you, because I don't think the Dungeon Master's Guide or the Monster Manual ever addresses that. Same would apply to liches and things of that nature. But it shows that you can have a character who totally understands what they are. They're vampire, lich, what have you, and even they still haven't completely mastered the fact that on a fundamental level they are no longer what they used to be. And this is a kind of change that as mortals we can't appreciate completely, because it's impossible for us to undergo such a change, because you just can't do that with life. So we kind of have to extrapolate and, suggest and whatnot. So towards that end, a big thing about intelligent undead is that over time, assuming they didn't already start this way, over time they will become insane. Because they are, whether they can admit it to themselves or not, they are trying to hold on to a moment in time that has already passed. Because especially if they willingly chose to become an undead creature to stave off death, to become immortal, because that obviously reflects that they either fear the hereafter, or they just don't want to go, which means they can't. They already had a difficult time embracing change. But now that they've become an immortal undead creature, they're almost incapable of change because they've locked themselves into a moment of existence. Because by definition, they can no longer grow, and the level that they can change is very limited because their mind is locked. Now they can still learn things, they can still gain experiences and whatnot, but it's going to be very difficult for them to change who they are. They've become a fixed point. And so the ones that still remain mobile and dealing with the world and everything, they're functionally insane. They can hide it. They don't even realize it. But ultimately, everything they do is either towards some vast scheming goal that will take centuries to fulfill, or it's to preserve what they have, perhaps to add to it if it's like a collection of something. Like Liches in particular were wizards. Typically they could have been sorcerers, but they're probably wizards. And well, actually, super technically, they could have been a whole bunch of things. They had to be a magic user and understand how to perform the ritual. So in older editions, there are other kinds of liches. There are druid liches, although that's usually through some kind of weird process that occurs. There's a dry lich, that's a desert druid lich. Psionic liches. There's a whole separate deal with them. Since they're not using magic, they had a whole separate process, and I had never heard about them before. So I didn't know anything about psionic liches until I got my hands on a monster an AD&D monster manual that happened to include them, and it's an interesting read. Interesting concept about how they have to go about doing their thing. Unlike a lich, unlike an arcane lich, they actually have to, like, one by one, remove their psionic powers from themselves and put it into the, I believe it's the undead body that they're making, that they're going to transfer their essence into. And, or is their phylacter, or is their equivalent to their phylacter. It's been a long time since I read the entry. But they have to go through the powers in a certain order, which means the closer they get to completing the ritual, the more vulnerable they are. Because the moment once they remove those powers, they can't use them. They don't have access to them anymore, because they're no longer in their mind. So they have to go through and put them in a certain order, because I don't remember which power it is, but one of them has to be the last power that goes in. Now, that, again, it's been a long time since I read the entry, but I believe the implication was that once they do this, they also can no longer learn any new powers. But again, I could be mistaken on that. Because I know a regular lich can keep gaining levels, so I don't know why a psionic lich couldn't. But anyway, the point is, there's a bunch of different kinds of liches, and not all of them require the willing consent of the individual being transformed. An arcane lich does, because it's a ritual that they have to perform. But some of the I know there's some of the druid liches that it's a matter of, they died with certain beliefs, and one of the gods is like, I might have use for you later, and transforms them and then unleashes them upon the world as a blight later on. So they're a little bit different because, again, they didn't choose to go down this path, because at least for a druid, lichdom should be quite antithetical to their whole existence, because druids are all about life and nature, and a lich is the personification of death. Like, there's no middle ground for them. They are death incarnate. And that's why liches have a number of the powers that they have, like the ability to cause fear in people, just because they are evil. They emanate the essence of evil. They're thoroughly infused with negative energy. They have willingly, they haven't sold their soul, because their soul's actually kept in a little box called a phylactery. But they have removed their soul from the cycle of life and death. So they are unnatural, and they just exude evil. And also, with a touch, they can harm and or kill people. So, that's liches for you. But the thing to remember about liches and vampires. Now, here, whenever I say vampires, I should be clear that I mean full-blown vampires or master vampires, or however you want to term it. These are not the same as vampire spawn. The key difference here is a vampire spawn is someone that a master vampire, to use movie terms here, because I don't think they're called master vampires, I think they're just called vampires. But essentially, a full-blown vampire can turn people into vampire spawn. That makes them, like, they're still a vampire, they've got most of the abilities, but their allegiance is to the one that turned them. And the one that turned them can, like, psychically dominate them. So they're essentially a slave. And the only way they can be free is if either the vampire that turned them is destroyed, in which case they're still a vampire spawn. It's just now they're free. Now at that point, their alignment reverts to whatever it was, because now they're a free-willed creature that has to drink blood. So, like, a long enough timeline, they're probably going to drift towards evil, but not necessarily. So they do have free will to try to seek some alternative solution or something. Now, the other way is if they drink the blood of a full-blown vampire, at which point it's the bite that turns them. Okay, it's not like in some movies where it's a bite, then you drink their blood, and there's a whole thing. No. If you get bitten, and I believe your hit points is reduced to 0 from the energy drain effect, you become a vampire spawn. So, if you then drink the blood of a regular vampire, and, the books never ever specify that it has to be the one that turned you. So it could just be another vampire. I guess technically, because again, the books never specify. Then you become, or the character becomes, a full-blown vampire. At which point your alignment shifts to evil. Because now you are, truly one with the darkness and all that business. Although the way it's portrayed in the fiction, a lot of the characters, well, it depends. I've actually read a couple different ways in a couple different books. Some, they just instantly go to straight up evil. Others, the characters are still themselves and they're trying to fight their new nature. So it really depends on how you want to play it. But the D&D, like regular vampires, they're significantly stronger, faster, can turn to mist, have assorted psychic-esque powers. Basically all the things that you've probably ever seen Dracula do in a movie, that's what D&D vampires can do. And now they can make their own army of vampire spawn to be their own legion of goons to send after people. And typically, the way this is I shouldn't say typically, the way this can be handled, and the way I think in past editions, and probably still 5th, recommends, is the player becomes an NPC at that point because their alignment does shift to evil, and they don't want you playing a vampire because whatever you were before, you're now a way stronger version of it. Like, yeah, sure, you've got some limitations, but you're now like leaps and bounds ahead of the party in terms of power. So they don't want that. That's bad balance. So vampires are the kind of weird middle ground, whereas a lich intentionally is like, I wish to live forever and I'm willing to embrace undeath to accomplish this. So there's already a level of being willing to accept evil there, and the idea that that you're okay with just becoming this unnatural thing. Whereas vampires, for the most part, it's not a willing thing. It happens. It's a circumstance that is inflicted upon someone. So because of that, they can be less likely to be willing to go the distance when it comes to that whole eternity thing. Because this is kind of, you can kind of read up on this in some of the Anne Rice books. Some people are cut out for eternity and some people are not. And since the whole vampire thing is, typically random as to who gets attacked and bitten and everything, odds are good that you're going to come across a lot of people that just aren't cut out for it. So they'll go out in some suicidal blaze of glory or something. And they're also not quite typically they're not quite the, centuries of scheming that you see in a lich. Because again, they didn't have that going into it. They weren't looking for that. And so it takes a while to come around to that kind of thinking. Now, this would be less of an issue for, say, probably a wizard, because a wizard probably already has somewhere in the back of their mind some half-baked scheme to become immortal anyway. So when it drops in their lap, they're like, all right, well, change of plans. This is the route we're going, I guess. Whereas, the lich route is the intentional, like, this is the end of the road, this is what we're doing, train's leaving the station. And you do also have other kind of bizarre combinations you wouldn't think of, like vampire clerics are a thing. Now, only a handful of the gods would allow them to be, their people, and typically the evil gods. And I don't know exactly what happens if a cleric of a good god is turned. I don't know if they lose their powers, because they've definitely they've almost definitely shifted alignment away from their deity, which should cause that. but also the fact that they do technically have to die to become a vampire, I think is the moment that the god can strip them of their powers. Because, you know, they're for life, and well, life's over. Afterlife begins. Or unlife, or however you want to put it. I know, at least in the realms, that's how Samaster lost his chosen status as far as chosen Mistra. He was killed and resurrected as a Lich. And by whenever that transition occurred, was whenever she was like, yeah, so like you had those powers through life, and well, you're done. Like you're into bonus levels now, but you don't need my help anymore. Go get them, buddy. So yeah, that's at least if I understood correctly, that's how that whole thing went down. That's in the Rage of Dragons trilogy, for those of you interested in all that. Samaster, for whatever it's worth, was the leader of the Cult of the Dragon in the Forgotten Realms until he got permanently killed. So yeah, that's the kind of things you run into with your vampires. They're a little less kind of locked in that moment of time, but they still kind of are, because being an undead creature, they still really can't evolve. They again, you know, like a Lich, they can still gain experience and levels, and but their outlook, I think they're a little more malleable than a Lich, in that yeah, you might be able to change their outlook on something, but it's going to be difficult, if not impossible. So you have that, whereas with a Lich, you may as well forget it. Like they're solidified. And vampires, again, like Liches, after a long enough timeline, are also going to be insane. Just because the mortal mind was not designed to exist that long. So that continuity of existence over centuries, you know, of knowing people, them dying, you know, governments changing, the map changing, the gods changing. I mean, a lot changes in a century. Forget several centuries. You know, so they can become secluded, trying to surround themselves with reminders of their time. That's what a lot of like vampires and liches end up doing, and so they work through minions and proxies, and but they also do that because, especially if you chose that, once you become immortal, the only thing you're going to fear is true death. And so if you chose to become that, to be immortal, to avoid death, now that you have that, you will do everything in your power to not lose that. So it's a it becomes a curse of sorts, because you got what you asked for, and now you'll do anything to make sure you don't lose it, which means you've got eternity to try to experience and enjoy, but you're potentially so afraid that you're going to lose it that you're not going to risk anything. So you're not going to ever venture out. You know, that's the kind of, you can encounter undead creatures that have become like that. You know, that have what they want and aren't going to risk it for anything. Which would make them potentially less inclined to fight the party, or the other way around, they view literally everything as a threat, and they will come out guns blazing at the party with the most powerful magic they've got. Which, to become a Lich, you had to be fairly high level to begin with, so you're probably packing some impressive spells. And so that's one of the other things is you have to kind of think about the psychology angle when you're trying to consider how they're going to interact with the party, because the party probably, unless there's some kind of like, oh, well, we know that the Lich resides in the castle over here, and we'd really like you guys to go deal with him. That's, in my opinion, I don't have data to back this up, but in my opinion, based on stories and novels and everything, that's probably not how it normally goes in a session. It's probably not like the townsfolk have paid you to overthrow the Lich Overlord. Like, I'm guessing that's not what it normally is. That most of the Liches aren't openly like that, except for characters like Zaz Tam in the Forgotten Realms. And even there, I'm pretty sure he tried to hide it for a long time. So what you'll more typically have is, and this is we're into the DM, the definite DMing part here. Say your player characters have stopped some kind of scheme. Let's say it's in the city, and some local gang, you got wind of they were going to be trying to steal some artifact from a museum or a wizard or something, and you were able to stop it and put it into the gang, and blah 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 blah. Everything's safe for now. Well, what you didn't know was that the gang was working for this guy who was working for this other guy who was going through an intermediary who is really the human servant of the evil Archlich who lives on another plane of existence, and whatever that thing was is really important to him. And now, by screwing up the plans, you're on his radar. And you don't even know it now, but you are. So now, some super powerful undead wizard has decided that you're worth watching. So now, the next interaction you might have with him is, oh, here's a random band of assassins who's come after you. And you're thinking, well, this is just retribution for taking out the gang or something. Okay. And you keep having these encounters that all have plausible other explanations until eventually you hit someone in the chain of command who's like, no, dude, like, this is all because of the thing you did like 5 levels ago, and the guy that's coming after you is like a level 18 undead wizard, and you can try to find him, using XYZ, like, here's the next guy in the chain of command, and, then work your way up through the chain of command until ultimately you deal with the Lich. That's more how things typically go, because again, the Lich is a super powerful wizard. He on the one hand, he could probably just teleport in there, grab the thing, and teleport out. But if he does that, then other wizards are going to know he did that. They're going to be aware of his existence now. He might be, 1,000 years old and is intentionally trying to keep himself hidden. So he doesn't want to advertise his presence because, again, he has his immortality. He doesn't want to risk it. He's the mastermind. He's not the canon. He can be the canon, and when you fight him, you're going to see that he is the canon. But before that point, you're talking plans within plans, that could have taken centuries to concoct, that your character's bumbled into and screwed up. And now that mind that can come up with those kind of plans has turned its inner eye onto your characters, and now you're in for a world of hurt, and you're not even going to know where it's coming from. That's how you use something like a Lich, because again, they're not going to be big and flashy out in public. They're hiding. they know they can win the battle, but they also know that by doing so, it's going to call down more and more other forces. Like, they're divine creatures whose whole point of existence is to destroy undead creatures. So the less of their attention you draw, the better. Or, I know for sure this happens in the realms, and I believe it would happen in other settings. Battles between two really high level magic users have the possibility to cause planar ruptures because of the massive amounts of magics that start to get thrown around. Because of two like, level 20 wizards with 9th level spells start fighting it out, they're not going to start with Fireball. They're probably going to start with something like Wish and just try to nuke the opponent as quickly as possible. Well, the opponent's going to do the same thing. And you're going to have all this magic colliding, and that typically spells problems for the cohesion of reality. So, the more powerful wizards try to avoid direct combat like that in the realms. And again, I would assume in other settings for similar reasons. So for them, they have all this power and they can use it to just smash people that to them are insects. But when it comes to their peers, it's a lot more like the Cold War, and they try to stay in a state of mutually assured destruction, or detente, or however you want to phrase it here. And so this applies to mortal and immortal wizards. It's not just liches, but other characters like Elminster or Raistlin would have a similar approach. Well, maybe not Raistlin. He was always willing to risk it all, so maybe not him, but say like a Mordekainen or something. So yeah, that's in general how I would run liches. And a more recent edition, I don't know which book it's from, had some interesting ideas on variants for liches. And one of them, I believe I'm the right name here, is the Eldritch Lich, which is essentially one that's been empowered by Cthulhu-esque entities, far realm stuff. I think that's got a lot of potential, because you've got your undead business, but also like your far realm insanity business going on there. So I like the concept. Definitely going to look into it a little bit. And I personally backed a thing on Kickstarter that had a bunch of different kinds of liches and variants, and had a whole bunch of like reasons for why they were doing things. Some of them, the idea was their ultimate goal is to transform again into a full-blown demon or devil, a high-ranking one, like a pit fiend or a Belor, to complete the transition into a full-bore team evil. So, because then they would be immortal, because the way the demons and devils work, like when you die, if you're one of them, when you die, you resurrect on the plane of existence that you're from. So, it's virtually impossible to destroy them. But yeah, so that's it's kind of a crash course in how I would use liches and vampires. I know I focused a lot more on liches there. The vampires, like I said, they're a little more contemporary. Their goals are going to be a little more like, oh, I want to take over, this gang, this town, this small city, because they have more weaknesses to deal with. So it's harder for them to actually seize control of things for long periods of time, because once people realize that, they're like, well, let's just get a bunch of clerics in here and blast the sunlight spell till there's no tomorrow. And like there's no tomorrow, not till there's no tomorrow. That would be bad. That means you brought about the apocalypse or something. And so you just, blast the bejesus out of them, and you just have to find the leader, take him down, and then like the whole pyramid collapses. So that's a little different. So, but they're also more reckless because again, most of them didn't like set out to become immortal that way. So now it's just kind of like, oh, great, bonus, So now it's going to be harder for me to be destroyed. So I'm going to use this newfound indestructibility to go like claim some crap. And so yes, they're more reckless, and they're about building up the minion force and things like that. Yeah, or you will occasionally have the vampire schemer who does have like some massive long-term plan, maybe even intentionally got himself turned or herself or whatever. And also with all of these, remember, any humanoid can become one of these things. It's not just humans, elves, dwarves, whatever. I'm given to understand in the upcoming Dragonlance thing, there's actually a Kinder vampire. Probably just meant as a, hey, the options are there. Here's what you can do with them. It's gonna be interesting to read up on that one. So you have, like I said, they're gonna be more reckless. It's possible that they themselves are going to be minions to a more powerful undead creature like a lich. Or, again, they could be the schemer. There could be a cleric of a death god or something. And they're slowly, like, building up an army of vampires or other undead creatures. Like your vampire cleric could be a necromancer, using his clericy powers to control other undead creatures and making an army or something. You've got options with vampires, but remember they can't do much during the day. Sunlight doesn't really affect liches or most of the other undead. It's mainly vampires, and running water too, if I recall correctly. So you've got those, and there's a bunch of other types of undead, but I wanted to mainly focus on those two. A Death Knight is also a mortal turned undead, turned intelligent undead. There, I think it would depend entirely on the nature of how and why they were turned. Because they're kind of like really, really stupidly powerful undead guardians. I haven't really seen examples in the fiction of ones that are like the mastermind or the go-to, like, to do anything. They seem to basically work for other people, typically. Like Lord Soth works for Takesis in Dragonlance, to a point, and there was a, hey, you have to, one of your people has to prove that they're worthy for me to consider working for you kind of things. But up to that point, he was just kind of chilling in his castle, listening to his undead banshee wife wail at him, and just kind of sat there. The one other Death Knight in Dragonlance, whose name I can't remember, he was a little more proactive once he was released. He was definitely a, hey, I'm going to just go kill a bunch of people. But that was more just his mentality. So, they're kind of a tricky thing, and, don't really know where they fall between, like, they're not really long-term schemers like liches, because they're not. They were in life, they were either fighters or paladins or something like that. So what they know is, stabbing things with their sword, not centuries-long planning. Just the way it is. So anyway, that's my ramblings for today on certain types of undead D&D creatures. Hopefully some of you got something out of that. If you want to know about other things, put it down there in the comments. like, share, subscribe, all that jazz. You know, this is YouTube. We like it all. But otherwise, I will catch you folks later.